Welcome to another episode of Freedom is Your Portion. My name is Nicole, and it is an honor to facilitate this broadcast. I want to talk to you today about giants. I think oftentimes we face giants, but we are unaware of their presence because we have masked them with other things. I'm reminded of the biblical story of David when he went up against Goliath. When David went up against Goliath, he was just a boy. He was going to take his brothers some lunch, and he happened to be around when a giant spoke against his God, when a giant decided to defile something that he believed in. And so as a result, David said that he would fight Goliath. This giant had positioned itself for over 40 days. He had threatened the army of Israel, and no one challenged him. But here's this young shepherd who comes and says, I am not going to allow this to happen anymore. I will not allow you to speak against a God that I serve anymore. And so when the word got to the king asked for David to, come and see him, and he offered to give him his armor, but David said, I can't wear this. I'm not accustomed to this. He says, but what I do know is that as a shepherd, I have taken down lions, I've taken down bears, and so I know that if God has prepared me to deal with those things, then I am equipped, I am capable, that I have what I need to take down this giant. It should be no different than the lion or the bear. And so David goes before Goliath, and Goliath makes fun of him because he's a boy and, he's small and he doesn't even have a sword. He has a slingshot and a rock. And so Goliath makes light of that. But as you know, David used that slingshot, and in the name of Yahuwah, he took down Goliath. And the rock that he used hit him on his head and took him down, whereby he fell face forward. And so all of this to say, I think that we deal with giants, but unlike David, we aren't as bold to take those things on. Instead, we're more like the army of Israel, and we kind of allow this thing to dominate and to have control of our lives. So you might ask, well, Nicole, what are these things that would be giants? Well, fear is a giant. Fear is a very, very big giant. You see, and fear is a giant because it masks itself in a number of different ways. Fear will mask itself behind insecurity and vulnerabilities. Fear will mask itself behind guilt or shame. And let's just unpack those things just a little bit, right? Because when we look at guilt and shame, what we're actually identifying is that, when something happens, when we experience something, the brain makes up a story about that experience. And so when we experience guilt or shame, that is based on our sense of moral code. It also plays on insecurities and vulnerabilities. The difference between guilt and shame is guilt says, I did something bad. I messed up. Shame says, I'm bad because of this thing. And how does that hide behind fear? Well, see, that hides behind fear because we become afraid of what other people may think about that, how other people may then see us based on those actions, how other people may treat us based on those actions, and if that means that our moral code or our moral compass is then defective, right? If there's something possibly wrong with us because we've committed this act or because we believe this particular way about ourselves. And as you can see, at the core of that is a fear, right? A fear that our moral compass is off, a fear that people may perceive us in a certain way, even a fear that we're not capable of overcoming that, of being better than that. In the same way the army of Israel was stagnant, even though that they had the God of all power, the God that was all knowing on their side, they were in a place of stagnation. And I think sometimes we allow certain things from our past to leave us in a place of stagnation, whereby we are gripped by fear. But I want to tell you that in the same way David overcame Goliath, we have the ability to overcome the obstacles that we face in our lives. We do not have to be controlled by giants of fear or anxiety or guilt or even unforgiveness. These things don't have to be giants in our lives. And if they are giants, it's because we have surrendered our power to those entities. What we need to do is, number one, face those things. We must face those things, whatever they are. We have more power in facing these things than avoiding them or sweeping them under the rug and acting as if they don't exist. By facing the obstacle, we're able to assess it and then take it down. We understand that, number one, it's not as big as we've made it out to be. And perhaps when we made up this story or formed this concept about this particular thing, maybe we weren't in the best place. But looking at it with spiritual eyes, looking at it, knowing that all things work together for the good of them that love God, looking at it, knowing that God does not give the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind, we know that we are equipped and able to overcome those things. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So we face that obstacle, we assess that obstacle, we seek divine counsel on how to address and overcome that entity. A lot of times when it comes to things like guilt or shame, it's really reshaping our thoughts, accepting our humanity, knowing that we're not perfect. This isn't the last mistake that we're going to make, but forgiving ourselves for making the mistake and then being grateful that we're in another place. We're in a better place and we don't have to repeat that mistake, but we can forgive ourselves for making that mistake. When it comes to things like fear, understanding that fear is the opposite. Fear is the opposite of love. And if we grab hold to loving ourselves, loving God, and trusting in God, we lose sight of fear and the things that terrify us. Because, see, fear only leads us to a place of stagnation. It doesn't allow us to produce the fruit of our purpose or manifest and take part in the fruit of the Spirit, because we've been gripped by fear. So it's important to do that. And it's also important to come into the place of acceptance. Accepting that we're human, accepting that we're going to make mistakes, and accepting that God knew all of these things before the foundations of the earth was established. And he still chose to love us, to create us, and to send his son to die for our salvation. We have to come into that place of acceptance, because it's that acceptance that brings us into the place of self-love. Don't allow the giants in your life to overtake you. Don't allow the giants in your life to leave you in a place of stagnation. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding, but acknowledge him in all of your ways, and he will see you through every obstacle. He'll encourage you and remind you that you have everything you need to face the giants of your life, to take down the giants of your life and overcome in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. My name is Nicole, and I hope that this has been a blessing to you. Grace and peace.